have these available at the Sons of God website. So if you follow on a Sunday evening, or if you have to get off early, you can always go back and listen to it. Our burden has been there is so much unfolding, and it's moving much more rapidly than we've ever seen. And I know from everything that we're receiving from the Lord that we're in the window of change that we have anticipated for quite some time. If the truth be known, we have probably been in this window for a lot longer than we've understood, but it has been a little bit of a struggle because we're still coming out of an awareness, still coming out of uh, seeing the partial, where our eyes are really beginning to open up and we're beginning to really perceive clearly. And it really is an honor to have all of you on the call. We've got different ones from literally all over the world. Uh, I don't know if they've all made it on yet, from New Zealand, Australia, Canada, South Africa, and then all over the continental U.S., and I think perhaps a few Hawaiians to boot. And there's just been such an anticipation because what a walk with God is all about, and not that I have to tell you, is that it's a walk of experience. It's not a walk of theory. It's not a walk of practice and reciting and rituals and routines, but it literally is a walk of transformation. And it's a walk of warfare. It's a walk of going through the deep work of the cross. And this is a path that we're all very, very familiar with. But it's an honor to have all of you. And the reason being, we still don't quite know who we are. And that knowledge, that awareness, that quickening, awakening is coming. And it's going to happen to us on a greater level. I think that perhaps that's one of the real differences with what happened at the time of Pentecost. And the similarity is that we are all in an upper room. I would greet you and say, "Welcome to the upper room." But this is where you are. This is where you live, even though it may be a step of faith at times, because it may not seem like the upper room. Uh, there are times when you can question, "Lord, are you sure this is the upper room? This feels like the lower room." But He has brought us to a plateau in His presence that no one has really walked in before. And so you look at what the disciples experienced at the time of Pentecost, and I don't know that they experienced an awakening within themselves who they are or who they were at the time. But they certainly experienced a transformation and empowerment by the Holy Spirit that brought them into fulfilling their calling and destiny at that time. Now, upon us, there's a completely different set of dynamics because so many of us have been sent into the earth at this time for this purpose, to inherit sonship, to go through the work of transformation, to come into resurrection life, much like the prophecy to Daniel. When the Lord spoke to Daniel, as we all know, "Go your way, Daniel. You'll rest and you'll rise up and receive your portion at the end of the age." So many of you are in that same scenario, even though you're not aware of it. And I believe part of what is unfolding and will unfold, and we should anticipate it, is a deep quickening. You could say an epiphany, something that happens that literally and finally pulls off the final layers. We wrote a book a few years back called Unwrap the Sons. The Lord's been speaking for quite some time about unwrapping his sons. But the unwrapping process has not been an easy one. The unwrapping process has been rather challenging as he peels off layer after layer and applies the fire. You know, that has been the path. That's been the way of his sons. But there is truly an awakening happening. And I think that's part of the difference of what happened to the disciples at the day of Pentecost and what we're experiencing and will experience even more so now. And that is, you could call it a remembering. A remembering. I mean, so often in the spirit, you stop and you listen, and you hear this drum beat, and it's just like something that resonates within your spirit, and it just says, "Remember, remember." And truthfully, we've not been able to remember. We've had the veil of the flesh that has separated us in many ways. We've walked as a dual personality in some respects. But it's been the deep work of the cross that's been pulling off the veil where you can begin to truly see and know. You know, even as the scripture says, you will know even as you're known. Well, you know, I've always said, okay, Lord, I feel the warfare, I feel the assault, I feel the strange confirmation. They obviously know who I am. But Lord, I don't think I quite know yet who I am. But he says it's coming. It's coming. I remember a vision several years ago that troubled me. And I was in this house. I walked down the hall and I knew exactly what I was sent to do. I walked into this room, closed the door, and completely forgot what I was doing there. Had no idea. And that happened over and over again, almost like Groundhog Day, 4 or 5 times. Then finally, I went into the room the last time, and I remembered who I was and what I was sent to do. And I feel like in many ways, that has been our path, all of our path, is to come into a real state of remembering, really beginning to remember who you are. Now, some people can come in there and you know and want to analyze you and say, well, I know who you are, and they look at you by virtue of your impairments, you know, whatever they may see after the flesh. And they could be brilliant people or whatever they analyze and say, well, this is what you are, and this is what you are, and so forth. But the truth is that you're none of that. What you are after the soul flesh is not at all who you are. And I'm, you know, here again, I'm not saying anything new to you. You know this. Uh, what you are after the soul in this present incarnation is not who you are. Your spirit is so much far, far greater, and that's the honor that we have in walking together in the spirit because of who and what God has sent into the earth. The word says he sent his, you know, he gave you his spirit. I'm paraphrasing. He earnestly desires the spirit that he has put within you. I think that's how it goes. The Father earnestly desires communion with your spirit. Interesting, more than we do. So the purpose tonight for the call, I could go on for a couple of hours, and I've got to be very careful. I have several pages of notes that I wanted to use to kind of key off of, but I wanted to try, or Lord grant it be so, that I can kind of bring, not that I want to bring all of you up to speed, but just to lay out what has been happening since the book 2017 was published. Because there's been a lot of changes, and rightfully so. And I know that the awareness maybe isn't where we want it to be yet, but I know that it's coming. I know that there is a huge shift in the spirit world, and we've been feeling the reverberations of that for some time. Kind of a left-handed confirmation, you might say. But it's important, and we've talked about breaking bonds, and we still don't realize how much we relate to ourselves, or have related to ourselves, in a way that is very limiting. You know, you can get up every morning and you've lived with yourself for however many years, and you look at yourself in the mirror, and this is who you are. And yet God says, that's not who you are. In truth, you're the light. And I've sent you into the earth to cast out the darkness. You're the children of light, and your Father is the Father of lights. And that which has blocked the emanation of this brilliance of light is being removed. And that's what it has been. God has been removing the blocks and the hindrances. And the message of the cross is certainly not popular. In fact, we've had so many come across the Sons of God website. And the minute the word gets a little bit too much on fire, or it just crosses their belief system, they're gone. And yet how important it is to stay open and flexible and teachable. But the Lord never said it was going to be done by many. Bringing in the kingdom is going to be done by few. And that has been the case, and it's continuing to be the case. You know, it's interesting that what we've been experiencing has been the principle of displacement. Ever since all of you have been on this path, ourselves very much included, it has been a path of displacement. I must decrease, he must increase. It's kind of like what's happening in the spirit world. Satan is being progressively cast down, but you can't have a vacuum. And so God's sons are progressively being caught up. And so the displacement continues. But the real displacement is the decreasing of what we are and the increasing of all that he is. And this is very much what is happening right now. It's the displacement. It's the takeover of all that the Father and the Son are within us. And it may look like you know, have the same form, maybe the same personality, but it's not you. So it's kind of an interesting situation. It's Christ. You know, people have said Christ in you, and that kind of becomes overused. Not that it's not true, but it really is Christ in you. It really is the Father in you. The part of the awakening that's happening, part of the epiphany, the realization, when I say to know who you are, we can't know who we are unless we know who He is within us. This is what's happening. It is it's something that is welling up within us of an awareness of the indwelling of the Godhead that is nothing like we've known ever before. This is not, just a cute statement, the Christ in me salutes the Christ in you and all that stuff. That's all fine. But it is a deep realization of that indwelling. And the more that breaks upon you, the more you realize how unlimited you are and the access you have to His presence. And everything changes when that realization really begins to take hold. And, it's not, and I've said this before, it's not like we're reaching out or reaching up to become the sons of God. You are the sons of God. Now, there may be those who are, on the outer skirts, like when Elijah was caught up. You had the sons of the prophets, and they were watching him go, and that's all they did. But Elisha wasn't so interested. Elisha wanted the substance of it. He just didn't want the cute little revelation, oh, Elijah's going to be taken up. No, that wasn't adequate for Elisha. And the sons, who you are is already here. It's already done. And the work of the cross, it may not be finished, but it's close. And you're not waiting to become. One of Satan's great tactics is to agree with us and agree with the Lord. Yes, these are great prophecies. Yes, we believe these prophecies for the future. It's always about the future. Satan is so clever, but he's not that clever. And the Lord has said, this is the time. It's time that you don't live in the past. Don't recount all what you were and what you did. Don't live in the future believing soon we're going to get it. But the thing that really hits pay dirt is when God says, it's time to live in the moment, right now, present tense. And that is harder to do than you think. I mean, all these books out there that are written, there's been that train of thought out there about, living in the now time or whatever. It's because people don't realize how much they live in the past or the future. People are always looking forward to tomorrow, to later tonight, to next week, next month, whatever, next year. And they don't realize how much the present has escaped them. Because in the present, you have to come to grips with your own unbelief, with your own inner dynamics. And that's where the groaning and the travail happens. So I know this is kind of like a really heavy word, but it just is what it is, because God is bringing us and desiring to get us out of the state of unawareness that we've been living in. It's time to know, even as you're known. And you know, I can say I could present certain things to you, and it's hard for me to quantify them or prove them to you, but I know that we have resurrection life right now. I know that we're in the workings of these changes right now. But in many respects, it has been a gradual process, and it's been tied into the renewing of the mind. And you know, that's where we're running to catch up here. You know, someone could say, well, you know, how's everything going? What's up with you? You could say, well, I am living Revelations chapter 12. You want to know what it feels like to be caught up to the throne? Well, let me explain to you what that is. You know, let's take it out of the pie in the sky. All of a sudden, one day you're going to wake up out of bed and there it is, you've been caught up. It doesn't happen that way. And I think that we all understand it, that our walk with God is an unfolding experience. And we're in the process of ascension. And the Lord has been very faithful to stretch us beyond our limits. You know, I don't know how much you've thought about that, but Paul in the book of Philippians, the actual Greek is that he was living with neck stretched out, that he might attain the out resurrection from the dead, you know, and whatnot, the latter part of Philippians. And I tell you, we are living with our neck stretched out, and our feet stretched, and our legs stretched, and our torso stretched, until you say, Lord, I don't think I can stretch anymore. And then he throws something else at you, and you realize, oh, I can't get it. And he says, you just got to stretch a little bit more. But Lord, I'm having a little difficulty with it. Well, you need to reach down and cut some of that ballast you've been carrying. Cut some of those weights that have been around your ankle. What do you mean, Lord? Well, we're in a paradigm change. You haven't been seeing things quite like I've been seeing them. You need to drop the way that you have been thinking. Drop your mindset. Drop your whole approach. And let me show you a better way. And, you know, this whole process of our walk with God has been a process of letting go. You've read the books. You've heard me say that so many times. And you can think, Lord, at what point can we stop letting go? Well, when we're into resurrection life, then I think we'll be there. And we're pressing into it. But we keep having to let go. And even though we don't realize it, sometimes we say, well, Lord, you know, can I just bring a little baggage with me here? No, my son, it's not going to fit through the eye of the needle. You can't carry any baggage, whether it's bonds, relationships, unequally yoked scenarios, or just your perception. You've got to be able to let go, you know. And it doesn't matter what you were. Maybe you were a great old order minister and you did all these things. That's fine. You have to let go. And that becomes a challenge. But we're in this push, and this drive has been growing, especially over the past, I'd say, 4 to 5 months, more than we've ever known as far as what we see happening. And it's interesting because basically the Lord has said, okay, for the longest time, resurrection life has been on the shelf. You have put it there, and you've been dealing with all these other things. But now you have to take it off the shelf. And every morning you get up, you need to look at it and you have to embrace it and say, okay, this is the time for resurrection life. And you just got to begin to just focus on it. Say, okay, Lord, I'm going to embrace this. Someone has to break the tape. How often I've said, someone has to open the door. If the door doesn't get opened, no one can go through it. And the door we're talking about is the breakthrough into resurrection life, the breakthrough into Romans 8, into the freedom of the glory of the sons of God. All along, we've been aware in these last 15 years in our path, or 20, whatever it's been, of the elemental spirits and a lot of those that dwell in the Father's kingdom. And there may be some that would have a problem with that, but we have to kind of step outside the box and keep stepping outside the box, because in our Father's house are many, many mansions. King James, great version. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. And Christ goes on to say, if it were not so, I would not have told you, and where I go, I'm going to bring you there. Well, it's interesting how we can read the scriptures and we kind of embrace them, but we never really get down to experiencing them or really dissecting them and say, okay, what are you talking about, Father? What do you mean? What is this all about? What are we saying? Because he's really talking about his kingdom and how vast and expansive his kingdom is. There's many dwelling places, many worlds, many dimensions in the Father's house. And when Christ, ascended, the word says he passed through the heavens. He set the captives free. Well, he didn't just set the captives free that were walking on the streets of Jerusalem. He set the captives free on so many different levels. And hopefully this doesn't stumble you at all, but I mean, we've had over the years many come from many different levels just to introduce themselves and to just say that they're a part of this travail and the warfare and the groaning to see this change happen. Romans 8 talks about how creation groans for the release of the sons of God. For what purpose? That they might be also set free from the constraints and control of the satanic infrastructure that exists. And so, in many ways, they've been compatriots with us. They've been in the yoke, groaning and travailing. Even though we haven't been aware of it, it doesn't really matter. But they've been very much here. And so you think, well, what can we do to help them? We just get the breakthrough. What happens when we get the breakthrough? I'll tell you what's going to happen. In the spirit realm, there is such an anticipation, not only from the elemental spirits, the angelic realm, and other worlds. There are other worlds exist that people have had prophecies about what is going to happen with the release of the sons of God. We have to so think outside the box here. What God is doing is not limited to the earth. God is so far greater than what we can see with our eye. And yet everything is waiting for the sons to get that breakthrough, because then everything changes. All the dynamics change. Right now, there is a huge shift happening in the spirit world. Satan and the hosts of darkness are being nailed. They are. And they're being cast down progressively. And it's causing an imbalance in the spirit world because the suns are in the process of coming up higher. Because you can't have a vacuum in the spirit. You can't have a vacuum. What happens in, New Testament talks about when you have a vacuum. You can't go and heal someone and then not fill them with the Lord and have them reach in, because what's going to happen? Seven more devils, more difficult than the last one, would fill the person, because the spirit world seeks to fill a void, a vacuum. And so we have one thing happening. The spirit world is under judgment. They are under judgment. And the shift is happening. And we haven't seen it yet, but we're going to see it on the natural plane. And it's going to be one roller coaster ride like you've never seen before. But it hasn't hit the natural plane yet. But it's coming, and it's going to come soon. So right now you have this shift, and there is a bit of a void. And that's why there is a push and a drive in the spirit for the sons to finish becoming, to finish, what has to be done in them, that they might rise and take their position in God, that they've been destined for, that you have been destined for. I'm talking third person, but this is where we are living. It's interesting that there's so much the more the Lord wants to talk to us about, and there are things that we can't even put words to, that are, I mean, things that are happening are not in our vocabulary right now. We can't look it up and say, okay, well, what does this mean? I have no idea, because we're talking spiritual words and natural words. But there is something happening within the frequency of God's sons, within your abiding place, within your internal makeup, even your DNA, that is going through a shift. And it's hard to understand it. There are things that you're beginning to feel and experience that don't seem to have any viable reason. You can go to, perhaps someone, they can diagnose you and say, well, you got this, this, and this, and this. Well, that may be true on one plane, but it's not really what's happening, because so much of what you see on the natural plane is only a byproduct of what's happening in the spirit. The spirit is the realm of reality. The natural is the realm of illusion. And so many things that are happening, you can say, well, what is this? What do I do to take care of this? And you're trying to think about all of these natural courses to deal with scenarios or things that you might be experiencing, and yet it can't be addressed from this level. You have to know what's happening in the spirit and in your spirit, because the changes are happening. And what we're looking for is going to manifest on the natural plane as soon as our spirits have fully embraced the shift, because we're a triune being, spirit, soul, and body. So we're not a simple creation, we're rather complex. And God is changing our spirits right now. And it's fascinating to me to think what's coming. I mean, it's just fascinating, because it's right here at the door. I remember a conversation I had with Albert Einstein about 10 years ago. And he shared that he knew the last frontier was the plane of spirit. And he saw in the way, however he saw that there was going to be a race of people come forth. Something different, something new, he didn't know what it was. He didn't know what they were. But somehow he sensed that and he conveyed that. And I understood because, the word talks about, God is doing something new. And, we can run that scripture into the ground, but he is doing something new. And I mentioned this in a recent word. Since your sojourn began, you've been living in a cocoon, awaiting, growing, maturing, waiting for the time that you would leave that cocoon and become a new creation. It's that whole thing of a worm to a butterfly, and we really are right poised at this point in time for these changes. It's interesting what we see unfolding even in the realm of healing and health, because everything is going through a shift right now. And I know that this might be a little difficult to accept, but as you change, as I change, as God's sons change, it affects the natural plane. It affects the spiritual plane. Everything is continuing to shift, continuing to change. And with that change that happens, there is a level of healing that's coming. There are changes that are affecting people even if they don't even know what is happening. It's hard to say. It's not about becoming, but it's literally about what you've become and embracing that. And so I'm just kind of checking through a couple of notes here of a word that came recently. I just want to see, don't want to miss anything here. So just bear with me for a second. I remember different ones that have come over the years. These are people that live on this side of the veil, not the other side. And they said, how long? How much longer? How much longer before the release? It kind of reminds you of the book Revelations when they say, how long, O Lord, before you will avenge us? The cry goes up. And these people have come through and says, we can't hold on much longer. And you realize that, it's their spirit that was coming through. And, we've had many come through the years that their spirit is reaching out and crying, how long? We have to have this breakthrough. And yet we're finally here. We're finally here. And everything is lining up. It really comes down to having eyes to see. And the Lord is giving his sons eyes to see. And I don't know how much justice I did to the word I wanted to kind of work from here, some notes. But God is opening the eyes of his sons. And that is changing the playing field. Because no longer are you striving to become, but you're beginning to realize who you are. And the requirement has been since day one, since we left pastoring churches years ago, it was to let go and to keep letting go. Lord, we just keep letting go. We keep letting go of our concepts, of how we think things are supposed to work, how our mind wants to get in there and figure it all out. Always wants to make a judgment. Okay, well, you know, I got to figure this out. Rather than just saying, Lord, reveal it to us. Because I know that it's only in the state of a renewed mind that you can even know the truth. And you really can't be set free until you really know the truth. And we know that that's more than just hearing it. It's a lot more than just getting a revelation of it. It's hitting that point where the truth merges within you. The truth, of course, technically is Christ, the Word. But nevertheless, we're just talking about embracing something. The Word is coming, and all we have to do is embrace the Word, and the Word begins to set us free because it changes us. So we're in this accelerated time of change, and our burden, Ann and I, has been to begin to just, share a little bit more of what's happening. It's difficult to try and throw together another book. There just isn't time to do it, and yet many words have come in the last several months, and they've just been on the shelf, things that we've been working on. But I feel that a word that came last week, and I think I might have mentioned it in the conference call introduction, is we really are at the time of Joel's army. And God is demanding that we take these things out of the future, and you realize this is where we are now. And he's been teaching our hands to battle, our fingers to war. He's been showing us an understanding of what bonds are and contacts and transference, how the enemy has worked to come in through back doors to restrain. But on the flip side, we've also begun to understand how to effectually move with authority and dominion, like in the book of Joel. Talks about how they, rush on the wall, they don't thrust one another through, but they leap in the houses through the windows and the doors. And you can say, well, that's really nice. But what is he saying? He's talking about access. He's talking about knowing how to move with access to really effectually get the job done. And so this is where we are, and our plans are every week, even if it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, doesn't matter. I want to just keep putting the word out, and I'll go back through and glean through some of the directives that have come in the last 6 months, or it's been about 6 months since the book, and present them to all of you. And like I said in the intro, I really expect that these words will simply be confirmation. They may put a few pieces of the puzzle together. They may connect a couple of random things, and all of a sudden it makes sense. And I think you all have experienced that. How the Lord, he gets me sometimes. He's I don't know, humor or whatever, but he'll talk to you at times about some of the most random things, and you can say, what, Lord? And he's talking about, like last week we're talking about being out of phase, and I'm like, okay, all right, Lord, that's fine. And or he'll talk about something else, and it really seems random, and you, after a while, you end up having a shelf full of random things, that don't seem to be connected and interrelated at all. But the truth of it is they're all part of this large puzzle. And so you see something here and you see a little over here. And so all of a sudden pieces are fitting on the puzzle, but they still don't connect. And then all of a sudden a word comes, an insight happens, and you see the missing piece and you put it in place and it all makes sense. And you say, "Oh Lord, it was 10 years in coming, but I got it now." I got it, Lord, I got it. You know, but he uses it. It was like, what was the word over Joseph? You remember Joseph having the visions of, you know, how did it go? The wheat bowing down before him, or something like that. We know the story of Joseph, but it also said of Joseph that the word, until it came to pass, the word tried him. How many words have you had from the Lord? How many visions? How many times in the quiet moments, just you and him, has he spoken to you deeply and shown you things that he's going to bring you into, things that you've been called and destined for, and you've held it like Mary, pondering and, just rejoicing and just deeply just reaching into it, only to find that it became the very agency of the fire that God used to put you through, to bring you to that point. And I'm just here saying, you know what? It's time. When the scripture talks about, can a nation be born in a day? Well, I would have to say that's a calculated answer. Yes and no. Yes, because it can happen in a day. But the truth is, if you look behind it, there was probably a great deal of preparation going on for whatever period of time. And then God just said, okay, let it be. What is this process of sonship that we're in the midst of? Can sons be born in a day? Yes and no. I believe in impartation, and I believe that God can, cut through the red tape, you might say. But I also know that the work and the preparation has gone deep within the hearts of his people. And then you get to that point where all it is just one last layer. He just peels it off, and all of a sudden you see. And when you see, you're changed. And that's where we are. That last layer being pulled off. And you say, "Oh Lord, we've been on this sojourn so long. It seems like nothing has really been happening, or it could seem. And yet the work has gone deep and deep and deeper. And the spirit world has come to a point where they are shaking like never before, because you're coming into your destiny now." So I bless all of you. It's been about an hour, and I thank you for being on the call. And I anticipate so much more coming in the weeks to follow, because I know we're in a shift. Ann and I, we don't share, well, I don't know how much we share really what we go through, but we've been experiencing some wild and woolly things. And, we just keep holding things before the Lord, because it's like, okay, I don't know what that was, and I certainly don't understand it, but Lord, we'll wait and see. Things are happening. The shift is on. And this is the time. This is the time that you've all been prepared for. And you know what? We're not going to have to build bricks out of straw. It's time that we really possess the kingdom. So with that, I'll click off. We'll have this posted at the Sons of God website tomorrow. And if any of you have any questions, you're more than welcome to email us. And if there's anyone else that you know that you would like to be on the calls, certainly let me know and we can extend an invitation to them. And what we'll do is we'll send out an invitation uh, prior to the next call. And as I mentioned as well, we're going to be doing a reread on the Manifestation of the Sons of God book. And the reason is there's so much more to be added to the book, but there isn't the time to write it and go through the traditional process. So I'm just going to read it chapter by chapter, and I'm going to wing it and add to it as we go. So there'll be 1 or 2 times a week that I'm going to do that. If you're invited, if you want to listen in, just email me back and let me know, and I'll put you on a separate list for that. But it's a burden that we get it done. It's been something that we've been burdened for several months now, and we just didn't get it off the table until now. So with that, Ann and I send our love, and we'll be in touch again soon. All righty, thank you.